Well, a lot of issues to consider in that particular interview, and listening to it with me are, of course, Peter Hitchens and John Irvin, Dean of Coventry. And we're also joined in our London studio by former employee of the British Security Services, David Shayler. Good morning, David. I'd like to go to you first of all. You're obviously listening to that particular interview. It has been put forward as a nutcase theory. But what's your opinion on it?
Well, I think it's not case theory at all. I think if you look at the evidence, Dr. Griffin is absolutely right. There are issues that were not explained by the 9/11 Commission. There was evidence that was not looked at by the 9/11 Commission. But particularly what they've got to answer is how there are hotspots on ground zero taken by a thermal satellite 5 days later. There's no explanation in the official theory about where the energy comes from to create that. But if you take the theory of controlled demolition with the use of the explosive thermite, one of the byproducts of that is molten iron. So clearly this would be the heat from the molten iron still glowing. And that's a very good example, really, of where the official story can't answer the question, but we can with our theory.
But on the other hand, I just made a few notes myself while the film was on. I mean, if you look at the monstrous actions that we've witnessed, and it still spells out as much horror today when you watch the film as it did 5 years ago. But, you know, he talks in a series about those, ingrained images of the towers coming down, conditioning for revenge. I mean, surely that's a very far-fetched theory, that there would be so...
No. I mean, we've actually realised now through historical research that this kind of what we call false flag terrorism is in fact routine. This is not 9/11 is not a new precedent. It's part of foreign policy and so on. And of course that's exactly what it was designed to do. And in fact the Project for the New American Century, a year before 9/11, produced a document called Rebuilding America's Defences. And in that they say they need to control the oil supply and the gas supply across the Middle East. And they say to do that we've got to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. And they say that the American public won't stand for that unless there is a catastrophic and cataclysmic event like a new Pearl Harbor. And we contend that that is the new Pearl Harbor. These neocons are people who've made money from the reconstruction contracts in Iraq and so on. This was quite deliberately designed to inflame American public opinion, to justify adventurism on the part of the Americans in the Middle East.
But let's just expand it a bit. I mean, why, and then I want to bring my guests in the studio in as well, why do you think that we as the public seem to go along with so many conspiracies, whether it was John F. Kennedy, that's been going on for years, whether it's Princess Diana? Why are we going down this conspiracy line so much?
Because I have to say, and using the words of Jesus, the truth will set you free. And if you start doing a modicum of research, which you don't find in the mainstream media in this country, which again is quite appalling and really is an issue of conscience for those people. If Peter Hitchens is a Christian, I would very gladly talk to him about 9/11 being an inside job, and I would expect him as a Christian to publicise that in his column in the Mail on Sunday.
Peter, your call.
Well, I don't feel obliged, I'm afraid, by your arguments, and I think that one of the well, let's stop going on about that. I'm a sceptical journalist, and it's my job to approach things with a certain amount of doubt, whether they're said by governments or whether they're said by other people. And it seems to me that this is just another feature of a world in which, after the collapse of orthodox religious belief, people will believe practically anything. I think if you care to prove this contention rather than casting doubt on the official version, you might get more of an audience, but it's going to be very difficult to prove. And it seems to me to be particularly ridiculous to imagine that in the most open, leak-prone society on earth, with a free press and an awful lot of people determined to dig out the truth, that if this is so, it hasn't been found to be so. There is a reason why. There's another, as you know, a hugely widespread conspiracy theory in the Muslim world about the same event. You can't get that out of people's heads either, which I won't detail here because it's so ludicrous. There is a reason behind this, of course, that the September the 11th events have certainly been used by the authorities to create a kind of cult to stamp out reason. And what they say, whenever anybody says, well, actually, I don't need an identity card, or I don't need all these ridiculous security measures that you're imposing on me, they say, no, 9/11 changed everything, and it's even become an incantation, 9/11. If you refer to it as September the 11th, you're a kind of heretic. But I object to that, but equally I object to any kind of attempt to say that I've got some duty to believe any theory about what happened that somebody cares to throw at me. You prove it, then it will be significant. I don't believe it can be.
Hang on, David, just a second.
I was trying to say to Peter, I will gladly come into the Mail on Sunday offices, I will show him films, I will explain the evidence. And Peter, I'm sorry, the Bible says that you should not come to conclusions without cross-examine witnesses.
Well, you bring the Bible and the tapes, and I'll look at both of them.
Look at the evidence.
David, I have to interrupt there. You've got to come to this studio first with all your film and your evidence before you go to Peter at the Daily Mail.
Mail on Sunday.
Mail on Sunday, sorry. But I do want to bring John in because, you see, in that film, the question was put to the professor who wrote the book about what a Christian's supposed to do. I mean, again, it's what can you do, or what are you supposed to do in a situation like this?
Well, I would agree with David that obviously we ought to be concerned about truth. I think I'm worried about the use of the word evidence. My background is in the law. I was a lawyer barrister, and it's a word that's flung around quite a bit. I think there is plenty of evidence of mistakes and confusion, but to talk in terms of these suggestions as evidence seems to me positively misleading. And as far as Christians are concerned, obviously they ought to be concerned, but not jump on bandwagons that are flying around.
We're out of time, but thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, David, from London. Thanks a lot. We look forward to seeing the evidence. I think Peter particularly does.
Absolutely.
Right, plenty more to come this morning.